Well, as you can judge from the title of this bloggy ranty episode, well, not ranty, just I need to be more constructive. Unfortunately, I've hit a stumbling block with Ruby. Everything to this point has gone ridiculously well. There are very few things that have broken on that car. Some things naturally have broken because I've been messing and getting my hands in there. And when you mess with cars, for every sort of 5 or 6 things you put right, there's 1 or 2 things that get broken, and that tends to be the ratio when I work on cars, which is as good as what you can get, to be honest. And we've managed to get the car on the road for the first time. The MOT lapsed ages ago. Unfortunately, that first drive was not far before the MOT expired. And we had some issues as a result of that journey. The car behaved impeccably well for about 30 to 40 minutes of driving, and then, as I said in the one video, it misbehaved on the way back from seeing a friend, and very badly, because I needed the choke on. And obviously later that evening I discovered exactly what it is with brake cleaner. The exhaust manifold was leaking a lot, and well, it was proving quite a nasty exercise to keep that car going. So naturally change the gasket, make sure that the surfaces are nice and clean. Now, the only thing that I haven't done with that is skimmed the manifold, and my experience was in the world of Rover P6 is when you take an exhaust manifold off, it might need a little bit of flattening, at least a file. And I did file it down to make sure that there was no undulations. But whether or not it's actually flat, well, I'm hoping it is, because that might be the problem. It might not be. But it all went back together very, very well indeed. New bolts, as you've seen, put it all back on. Still the same problem. It will not idle. It cannot idle without cutting out. It needs the choke on the choke and the fast idle to keep going. As soon as you put the choke in, even when warm, boom, dead. Absolutely dead. So I checked it all again, and it was still, even though I'm trying to lower the choke and get the car to lower and idle as low as possible, and it was about 1,000 RPM, it was still fluttering. We're getting hunting, which usually means too much air, not enough fuel. But this is a bit more weird than that, because then I looked at the inlet manifold gasket and it was leaking also, as you saw in that video. So we've got to change that gasket as well. It's good practice. Good practice. Change your gaskets. Make sure that there's at least air getting to that carburetor through that intake system as possible, and not disrupting that air fuel ratio that I'm trying to get down to a T. Still the same. Still the same. Now, that was the last video I did on this car about, I think, a week ago now. And since then, I've been scratching my head as to what it could be. Because if it's not leaking from those 2 items and it's still fluttering and cannot exist without the choke, what is it? That carb's had a complete rebuild. That leads me to the next thing I had a look at. Now, in that rebuild video, there was one particular thing, one particular set of items that I made sure I did not disturb whatsoever. And that was the jet needles. We've got 2 idle jets and 2 main jets, the 4 of them. They're like, the 2 main jets are like emulsion shoes with holes to mix the air fuel in a very blended fashion. Very, very complex, but very sophisticated. Weber carburetors have a very good reputation for being extremely efficient at what they do, far more than SU carburetors. But this one seems to have niggles. The first niggle was that, despite, and I guarantee I did not mix them up, on that bench they stayed where they were as I took them out. The main jets were mixed up. The numbers were in the wrong place. I checked the Haynes manual, they were in the wrong Venturi. So the primary main jet was in the secondary main jet hole, and they were mixed up. The idle jets were correct. The idle jets were correct. There was no dirt. They were blown out. Everything was cleaned. Everything was cleaned. There's no sign of blockages whatsoever in the idle system. So I changed that, put it back on. No, same. And I thought that because it's the main system, not the idle circuit. Because in a Weber, you have the idle circuit and you have the main circuit. Car runs fine on the main circuit. Well, it will run even better now, considering the jets were mixed up in the wrong Venturi slot. But the primary circuit is the one that's at fault. The other thing that I discovered when I took it off again is when I checked the float, I didn't actually check the float correctly. Now, this is a mistake I did make. So with SU carburetors, you dangle it upside down so that the float is pushing into the needle valve itself. Don't do that on these. You have to rest it on its side, sort of hold the top of the carb on its side with the float this way, dangling this way, and it's supposed to not push there's a little ball bearing at the end of the needle valve. I was pushing it in, not supposed to, you're supposed to let it rest. The other thing is, something I didn't actually notice, is that the tag for how far the float actually drops was bent. It wouldn't have come like that originally. It was actually bent to the point where the float was probably only going down a little bit. So that poor float valve wasn't opening enough, despite the fact that I've now actually reset the float level correctly to the book. 8mm it says, from the top of the body to the float as it is resting against the ball. It's 8mm to an absolute T. And guess what? Put it back on. Success! We got it working. It was brilliant. The next time I started that car, it was brilliant. I could tell the moment I started that car, everything was like, whoa, this is calm. This is really nice and calm. 20 to 30 minutes on that driveway. I got it set. I just fine-tuned the idle air mixture and the idle settings and the throttle kicker setting and the fast idle. So just retune them up. Perfect. Then started to go downhill. So this is half an hour of just revving it, half an hour on the driveway, because obviously the MOT is expired, can't go nowhere, which is the problem I'm facing at the moment, doing it on the driveway. Just, it's not possible, and the neighbours are getting annoyed now. Well, they're not getting annoyed, but I think they will be getting annoyed with the amount of cranking and revving and smell of old car. It's, yeah, it's getting to that point now. But after half an hour, it started lowering its idle speed by itself. I was like, why is the idle speed changing? Okay. So I started just fine-tuning it again, and I kept it at the right temperature. I had to bridge the fan again to stop the car getting hot, because when the temperature goes up, you might get an overly lean mixture reading. So when the temperature drops, the car might die. And that's what I was thinking might be happening. No, it kept on dying. It literally wouldn't idle. It got to the point where it just shut itself off. The idle would shut itself off. I'd start it back up and it'd die again. So I'd have to pull the choke out. So when you pull the choke out, the fast idle screw kicks in and it hires the idle to about 1400 RPM. And that was where the car was sitting, about 1400 RPM, quite fast. And that is how I received the car when I first bought it. And now I'm thinking this is exactly the problem. I certainly know that, Rob, you had this exact same problem and you never had the time to get round to it, but you knew there was a slight issue. And Kieran, you obviously, I don't know if you knew there was an issue there, but the tape on the choke cable kind of gave me the impression something was not right. Something that I thought I could cure, but it turns out I don't think I can, because I've checked every single orifice on that carburetor. I'll tell you now, at the end of that episode, that little trial, I should say, I got it on the choke. As soon as I take it off the choke, died. But if I put it in gear in reversal drive, it will hold its idle. It wouldn't be particularly happy. It was still fluttering about 900 or 1000 RPM, but it would hold itself in gear. As soon as you put it in neutral, bam. In fact, I'll show you this video now. This is what my car is doing, Rob. It just will not work. Strangely enough, I've got no choke on, but if I put this into neutral, dead. Do you know what? I'm getting sick and tired of this, you know. I think this carburetor is absolute junk. Yeah. Yeah, that was not me being stuck in the moment. I think this carburetor is absolute junk. I've rebuilt that carburetor exactly as it was presented. The only thing I would say is, why were the main jets mixed up? Somebody has been in there before, and my worry is that I have merely copied what somebody else has done, and that's what I was thinking. So I took the carburetor back off at this stage. So I took it back off and I thought, do you know what, let's just take it apart. Not as much as I did before, but let's just inspect everything. Let's make sure the throttle discs are closed. Make sure they are seated properly. A lot of this I checked anyway before I put it back in the car in the first place. But I thought, let's go over again, because I've already discovered problems with the jets, then the float level. I have to say though, changing that float level was the one thing that made that car better for 20 minutes. And then it decided, no, don't like this. I have no idea why. But as the temperature rose just out there now, I have just today started it up again. And again, do you know what? It doesn't feel like the same car now. It feels like there's so many things that I've had to not tamper with, correct, that it's not making things better. It's just, I think I'm getting myself into a bit of a hole with this carburetor. Now, most of you at this moment in time are going to try and type probably some comments, maybe to help me out. I hope that some of you have got ideas, because I'm out of ideas. Because as far as air leaks are concerned, well, first of all, we got the carb off again. I blew out all the passageways, because this all stems from blocked idle circuit. And a lot of people have said that 12 volt solenoid on the back, make sure that it is actually pushing it's actually working, because if that 12 volt supply is lost, it literally cuts the idle circuit and it cuts the car out. That's what it's there for. Now, what I've done with that, I've tested it and I wasn't happy with it. It was sticking. So what I've done is that solenoid is now in the bin. It's in the bin. I don't care about it. It's a pain in the ass when they go wrong. The only way you can get another one is by getting another carburetor. And the one on my car is unique to the automatics, which is going to make it a pain if I want to buy a new one, find a new one. It really will be. Now, I have the other option of buying another carburetor, because there is actually one up for sale right now. And I'm thinking, I might buy that, lop it on and see what happens. But this is me guessing. And I don't like guessing and trying to guess what's going on. But I think it's important when you have such issues to take a step back. I do apologise for talking too much here, but this is my mindset with such things. And I think it's important to have this problem-solving aspect when you've got this sort of problem. And I'm scratching my head. So, carburetor, blew out all the passageways, fine. No problem. Put it all back together. I was very happy with everything. In fact, what this has done is it's made me understand exactly how that carburetor works inside, how all the valves are supposed to do what they do. It's absolutely fascinating. As far as I'm aware, the throttle kicker works absolutely fine. The choke pull-down vacuum, which opens the choke slightly when the car starts to stop you flooding it, that works perfectly fine. The power valve, that only operates under a lot of vacuum, and it only operates at 80% throttle. That will open and allow fuel to go from one side of the well, where all the fuel sits, into the main jet, and it pumps it in. So it's basically like a kick down valve. It pumps tons more enrichment into that car to get you that acceleration, because that's what you put when you put your foot mostly way down the pedal. Why do you do that? Acceleration. You need rich fuel. That works perfectly fine. The 12 volt solenoid has been thrown in the bin, but what I have done is I cut the thread off that solenoid and wound it in at the back of the carburetor. So it's a plug. Essentially, that is now a plug where the solenoid used to sit. It's not interfering with the fuel flow. I know that is good, and I've just put the plug out the way. If I get a second-hand one, I'm sure I'll test the solenoid, and if it works, I might put it on. But for originality, I like things to be there, but I'm not one for sort of taking things off and blocking it off and putting the plug out. I don't like stuff like that, but it's just one of them. It's one of them things you have to do. So I've checked all that out. The vacuum lines. Check the vacuum lines. Make sure they are where they're supposed to be. And there's only 3 vacuum lines. There's one that goes to the throttle kicker. There's one that comes off the inlet manifold at the back to go to the throttle kicker solenoid that sits on the bulkhead. And then the other one is, there's another vacuum pipe that sits right at the back where the solenoid would usually sit. And that takes a vacuum to the servo. It's simple as that. So I've got all the vacuum lines where they need to be. And what I have done is I've managed to hose clamp one of the breather pipes on the inlet manifold, because I remember when that pulled off the one time while tuning, couldn't get it started. Why is it not starting? Oh yeah, because it's pulled off, too much air. So I've tightened things up, clamped things down, and it's still done no good. The smoke machine, I've got my smoke machine out. These are all things I've done off camera, guys, because I want to get a diagnosis, and time's against me at the moment. And I think time is no longer against me, because my plans have completely changed for this car now. This has forced my hand a little bit. So smoke machine out and no leaks. Chucked it down the carburetor throat. No leaks from the upper gasket, which is brand new, part of the rebuild kit for the carb. No leaks from the sandwich spacer or the 2 gaskets, which weren't particularly great, I have to say, but there's no leaks from them. And generally, you don't get leaks from them. If it is, it's absolutely tiny. It's not going to cause the issue we're experiencing. And the inlet manifold gasket, absolutely fine. No problems with that whatsoever. I probably over-tightened some of those nuts on the inlet manifold, but I wanted to make sure it was tight, a little bit more tighter than specification. The exhaust manifold was done a little bit more than spec. 17 Newton meters is the specification, but I did them up to 22, so a bit more, a bit tighter, but only a bit tighter because they have a habit of getting loose, as we saw. No leaks from there whatsoever. However, there are a few things that have made me realise it could be a carburettor issue, and this is what I'm going to come to next. Rob, who you've seen his cars, he has a Ford Escort Mark IV in red, LX, and I mentioned when we went round his collection at Christmas that the carburettor was away. Why? Well, that carburettor is the exact same carburettor as mine. The only difference is for the manual gearboxes, there's a little special secondary diaphragm on them. Now, that carburettor you can get brand new off the shelf for about 350 quid. The one I've got, you can't get them from what I can see, but some people will know where to get them from. There's brand new ones somewhere. But I'm pretty sure if I wanted to put that one on mine, it wouldn't be the end of the world, particularly if it works. So that's the other option anyway. But he's taken Moo, as she's named, to a specialist, a Weber carburettor specialist down in Kent, not far from where he is, and or not far from London anyway, as far as I'm aware. And he's been working on these for 30, 40 years. And his advice when it came to the 2830 is, oh, we used to bin them back in the day. They were junk. We used to just buy new ones. We had constant problems with them. So that's really made me feel good straight away. But at least I know where I stand. So he's taken the car in and rebuilt it, ultrasonic cleaner, that sort of thing. Put it back together, rolling road, 5 minutes, literally 15, 20 minutes on the rolling road, tuned up to perfection. And after a hefty bill, because this guy is expensive, and a new distributor because there was play in the distributor shaft. Luckily, I don't have that problem with this. There's no play in that shaft whatsoever. So this Escort is a 1.4 CVH, I'll tell you. It's done 81,000 miles. So a bit more wear than Ruby suspectedly, possibly. But apparently when he drove away, Rob said it's got power. It's got absolute power. It's brilliant. But he kept the choke on. After about 5 or 6 miles away from the specialist driving home, he put the choke in. Guess what happened? It made absolutely no difference whatsoever. And the specialist was a bit peed off, to say the least, because he had it running to a T. And there were no issues, no stalling, no hesitation, no misfiring, no nothing. So he took it straight back, and that car currently is still there at the time of this video, at least. Suffice to say, he's having serious issues, I think, with that car, because nothing has been heard since. So I'm awaiting the results of that, and so is Ruby, because once I know where that car stands, I think I know where my car stands. And this used to be a hot issue with this car, where it would be fine cold, but when it got hot, it started playing up. And then when it returned to cold, it was fine again. Now I'm getting a constant issue when cold. Even when it's cold, it's not happy. It's not a happy car. Now, this breeds a whole host of thoughts in my head. Firstly, I'm going to show you a series of videos now. So one after the other. So today, I started it up. This is how the car behaves, so you can actually see how she's behaving. Dead. Bummer. Right, now we're not quite warmed up. We're getting there, but unfortunately the car is already starting to play up. I have no idea what this is, but I'll just demonstrate one thing. Now, if I have it in gear, I'm going to take the choke off now. Okay. Ooh, it's getting there. Now, it seems to be behaving quite nicely in gear, but as soon as I do this, it might as well be a kill switch. That is so blimmin' weird. It only stays alive in gear. Ah. Okay, so that's the situation we've got. Not good, is it? Not the car that I was tuning up not long ago and tuned it up, I thought, to quite a perfection. Now, that makes me think that there's some internal issue going on. So when I last got it to temperature, I did a compression test. Now, I've got to be honest, every car that I have done a compression test on has not fared particularly well. And let's just say I've never had a car that has got to its what would be suggested ideal compression. Beatrix, after I did the head gasket, was reading 115, 120 on each cylinder. And I thought that wasn't particularly great considering all the work that's been done. And it pulls like a dream. So as long as they're equal, that's okay. If one of them's out, that's a problem. Could be a drop valve, could be anything, piston rings, you name it. Now, I'm already aware that this car burns smoke, burns a bit of oil, and it will blow a bit through the breather. So if I took the airbox off and had the breather pipe free and I rev the throttle, you'll get a bit of a spurt out the breather pipe. So i.e. that's piston blow through, that is compression going past the rings into the crankcase and coming back through the breather. So that is, as far as I'm being told, quite normal with CVHs. They weren't the most tolerant of engines going. So I'm quite aware that it's just something you either have to live with, or do you want to change piston rings? Not really, because that's another level. But nevertheless, if I intend to do what I'm going to say next, it might just be more accessible. The plan was always that the oil in the engine was going to be replaced with 1540. So I'm going to put some thicker stuff in there, only slightly thicker. Don't go more than 1540 because the hydraulic lifters will start to play up. Don't do it. Or pump up, as they say. They will pump up and they won't work. They will make a noise. 1040 or 1540 as per the Haynes manual, as per the book. Nothing more than that, please. So I intend to change the oil for slightly thicker stuff, which will help with the burning. It won't probably eliminate it. There are, as I say, Lucas oil stabilizer to seal the corners. I think that stuff has worked a treat because that car rarely leaks in the corners. The only sort of oil leak, and this is me being picky, is there's a bit of an oil leak from the distributor flange, and that's quite normal. With distributor flanges, there's always a bit of oil that gets past the distributor flange where the two bolts are. It's as simple as that. So we were going to take, my intention was to take the sump off. I will disturb the sump. I will take the sump off, and I want to know what the state is under the sump, because I expect gunk. I expect to see an oil baffle that might have some degree of blockage. I reckon it might have some, but not enough. And the oil pressure is good in this engine, and the oil has been regularly changed up until 2009. So, and the state of the cam and the camshaft and how quiet it is probably testament to how well it's been looked after. There are naturally many things I will discover if I start delving in, but it will be, I think, a process that I was going to do in maybe 6-7 months' time. But now I think I accelerate. While the sump is off, there is two things that I've noticed with changing the exhaust manifold gasket and the inlet gasket, especially when I took the inlet manifold off. And that is excessive carbon deposits on top of the valves. Now, naturally, valve stem seals leaking down the stem. And where does it sit? It sits on the hat. It sits on the head, doesn't it? And it sits there. And I think we do have some slight valve non-seating issues. Now, this ties in with the compression test I did on this car. When it was warm, it was registering around 90 to 100 per cylinder. Give or take 10%. That's important. There must be no more than 10% of a variation and you're good. And they were roughly around 90 to 100. So I'm pretty happy that all of them are relatively the same. But it's low, isn't it? I think that's because of the piston rings. They're not sealing as well as they should. There's blowback into the crankcase, which is why we've got heavy breathing. And that's why CVH is heavy breathe, because they do wear. They do wear. Things were not as tolerant. I suspect from the factory, some of these cars were puffing smoke out. It was literally that bad. They didn't care. Ford's quality control was awful back in the day. Now, there are ways I can solve that, but there's one way of gaining a bit more compression, and that's making sure that all those valves are removed, cleaned, and grinded back in, lapping. And I fancy a bit of that because it's something that I've never done before, but I am very aware of how to do it properly. I've been shown, you get your coarse and your fine paste. You have to be careful. You have to inspect things. There might be some skimming involved. I'll probably have the head skimmed, nevertheless, to just be on the safe side. This obviously means the head has got to come off. This means a change of head gasket as well. How ironic, a Ford, and I'm changing head gasket on it. There's no signs that head gasket is actually failing, but there is dirty coolant, and I'm not sure why the coolant is changing from a blue to a light brown colour quite easily. I think there's just tons of sediment in the block. It's a cast iron block, and I expect sediment. So it could be that. It could be that. So I'm not going to sort of think about that too much. But I intend to change the blue stuff for red stuff in the long term because I've changed the water pump and there's no signs that actually what I would do would be detrimental at all to the system. It would just need a good flush out once again. So all this will probably get done at the same time. So a lot of what I've done is going to have to come back off again. Possibly the exhaust manifold will be skimmed as well. And then we'll see where we are. And then we can clean up the pistons, clean up everything, possibly have the cylinder head decoked. The options are endless. I'm not going to rule anything out, but at the same time, I'm not going to be spending crap loads on this car because at the moment, it has not given me back anything at all. And I'm significantly, I'm quite a lot into this. And I'm kind of now wary that I've spent a bit too much money in some areas that are not to do with the running of the car. And as much as this car gives me confidence in a lot of areas, the carburettor is giving me some head scratching moments. And I think if we go down that line, we've got a replacement carburettor to source, a new one. So I am going to leave this episode here because there isn't really much more to say other than I was hoping to get this car ready for the show season and have the paint done in a few places. It's not going to look brilliant, but as you can see, the priorities are making the car run because it's not a static exhibit at the end of the day. It needs to be used. So, yeah, I'm going to await the results from this specialist on what the solution was for that car. Naturally, my car is a different car. And it could have a slightly different issue, but they've both got the same symptoms. They will not run without the choke. This is very, very weird and a very strange one in the world of usually fixing and tinkering. And things are a bit quieter at the moment. I'm having a lot of work in my own life. So things are a bit slow. But whatever choice I make, and I think I've made it already because I've taken so much off that car, and I now have experience of changing head gaskets. Every engine is different and you need to look at things a bit more closely, but I've got a feeling that the carburettor's issues are not necessarily just down to the carburettor. When you eliminate all the basic issues like spark plugs, HT leads are good, rotor arm's been changed, distributor gap's been changed, coil's been changed. The ignition amplifier, that I've bought a new one. I wanted to eliminate the issue. The old one has gone in my spares, and it will go in the spares in the boot just in case, because I know now it works fine. But I just wanted to change it just to rule something out. But also, it's good to have that as a spare in the boot because that would probably leave me stranded if it packed up. So that's been changed as well. There's a number of things that I've looked at. I have not ruled anything out. The stupid little things that, oh, it could be this. Have you checked this? Have you checked that? I'm sure that the comments here are going to be full of that. And if you have got a suggestion on what it could be, if you have experience of either, this carburettor was fitted to early Mark III Fiesta 1.4s with a CVH. It was not fitted to any other Mark III Fiesta. The Kent engine had its own single or twin Venturi carburetors, but they were a bit more different. I can't use one of them. Before someone says, I can't actually adapt my inlet manifold to accept another carburetor at this moment. But it hasn't crossed my mind that if this is such a troublesome carburetor, it might be worth looking at different carburetors. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. But Mark IV Escort 1.4. So between 1986 and 1990, this carburetor would have been fitted to a 1.4 Fiesta Mark II and the Mark III towards the start, and an Escort 1.4 from 86 to 90. Okay, those are the three cars that this carburetor was fitted to. If you have had one of them particular cars in the past, let me know, and let me know if you've had any problems with this inherently bad carburetor. I'm going to leave that here. Sorry for the long whinge, or not whinge, but a detailed description of what exactly I've been doing and what I've already done. And this will bring me to the last thing I will say. Taking this to a garage is a no-brainer. I will not do it. I could change the head gasket on that car for the price of the part, because I can do it all myself. I don't need to take that car to a specialist, or so-called specialist at the moment, for them to conclude the same conclusion as me. We can't work out what it is, but it looks like you've got a carburetor fault. Here's a 200 quid diagnostic fee. You see my problem there? For £200, I could do an awful lot of money on my own driveway, which is why some people might accuse me of guessing, but I think this issue could be a bit more internal as well, and why it's not settled. If valves are not closing because of carbon deposits or not seating correctly, that's going to lead to poor air fuel mixture, and that's going to lead to serious issues within the carburetor. So I'm going to avoid going down that road yet, and I'm going to get back to you. And the next time you see me, or Ruby, she might have had quite a few bits removed. Exciting stuff. And as always, when I'm editing videos like this, I tend to, I've forgotten to mention that. I think there's one thing before I finish that needs mentioning. I have no service history with this car. I am guessing, based on the condition internally inside that engine, that this car has had regular oil changes. There are Ford parts everywhere on this car. Now, I was only told this because that's what Rob told me, that's what he was told by Kieran, and that's what Kieran was told by the dealer. So you can kind of get the picture here that it might be a bit of Chinese whispers, but the condition of the car suggests a very, very well kept example. And I have no question that it was a very well kept example from the same lady who bought it brand new for £10,000 in 1989, and she kept it until 2009, where she laid it in a garage. Why? I'm roughly assuming she gave up driving because she couldn't no more. But it's a guess. She could have put it in there because there was a running issue, and she got sentimental about it. Now, we are talking about a 20-year-old Fiesta in 2009. That probably wouldn't have been worth much at all. Sentimental value, really, more than anything. But that probably hasn't stopped people from putting cars away before, even though they had running issues or they couldn't drive them. Maybe she put it away thinking she could actually get back on the road in a few years if her health improved. If it was her health issues, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm guessing. I'm really guessing. But all I know is that this car has been handed down from one person to the other, and this issue has possibly remained there ever since. So it's obviously an off-putting factor when it comes to this car. Clean example, great example, can't run properly. I intend to stop that. Full stop.